everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight for the opening night panel discussion for PAWS, Protest, Activism, Whimsy, and Self-Care in Animal Crossing. My name is Blair Fornwald, and I'm the Director-Curator of the School of Art Gallery at the University of Manitoba on Treaty 1 territory in Winnipeg. I'm speaking to you from the homeland of the Métis Nation and the ancestral lands of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dakota, and Dene. Signed in 1871, Treaty 1 took territory from 7 Anishinaabe First Nations to make the land available for settler use and ownership. We acknowledge the harms and mistakes of both past and present, and we dedicate ourselves to moving forward in partnership with Indigenous communities in the spirit of conciliation and collaboration. Wherever you're joining us from, I would ask that you take a moment to consider the lands that you're on and your relationship to it and its original caretakers. Before I turn it over tonight to PAWS curator, Ciel Noel, who will introduce the artists and facilitate tonight's discussion, I would also like to acknowledge that the School of Art Gallery is generously supported by the University of Manitoba, the School of Art faculty and staff, national and provincial funding agencies, donors, and volunteers. And the work that we do wouldn't be possible without our fantastic team. Donna Jones, C.W. Brooks, Jean Borbridge, and Christina Hajar, as well as our student monitor, Casper Stein. And of course, my deepest gratitude goes out to Ciel Noel, who has been such an asset to the gallery's team. Ciel is a fine arts student and at the School of Art, and is completing a second work study term with us. As the gallery's digital assistant, she researched platforms and implemented strategies to present programming that connects us virtually. Importantly, increasing access to art now and giving us the tools that'll serve us well into the future. PAWS builds upon this research and Mal's experience as an interdisciplinary artist working with crypto technology and game design, amongst many other media. We also received tremendous support from the School of Art staff, and I want to extend a special thank you to Kayelynn Harrison, our Media and Events Coordinator, as well as to digital technician Trevor Baziak and LAN coordinator Frank Fernandez, who are our amazing tech support staff. On behalf of the School of Art Gallery, I would also like to thank Melissa Edwards, aka Battleax Bunny, for her brilliant design work on PAWS, and to the artists Adelle Lin, Kayelynn Kennedy, and Hōkū Schurz, who have used the Animal Crossing platform to thoughtfully address the very real human needs we have for togetherness and connection, self-expression, and joy, particularly in difficult and stressful times. PAWS is up now, and if you have a Nintendo Switch and Animal Crossing, you can visit the exhibition in-game. The Dream address is posted on our Instagram page, and it's also in the chat down below. If you don't have Animal Crossing, you can also check out our website and YouTube channel where there's a video tour of the exhibition led by Ciel and Noel, led by Ciel and Battleax Bunny in conversation. And next Saturday afternoon, March 13th, Ciel will be hosting a curatorial talk and tour of PAWS over Zoom, followed by an afternoon of learning how to make custom prints so that you can customize your own islands with custom art. I would also like to remind you that the School of Art Gallery is now open by appointment. You can just call or email to set up an appointment, and the details on how to do so are on our website. From now until March 13th, we are presenting an exhibition called Dancing with Tantalus. It's about the crisis of touch, and it is guest curated by Lillian O'Brien Davis. Features work by Gabrielle LaRondelle Hill, Katie Lyle, and Ella Dawn McGuff. We're also presenting a video by Toronto artist John Sasaki. And this Thursday, March 11th, we'll be live streaming a performance by the Winnipeg-based dancer and choreographer Ali Robson, who's going to be performing in the exhibition space for Dancing with Tantalus and responding to the ideas that have shaped that exhibition's development. There's more still, and I would just encourage you to visit the School of Art Gallery's website or our social media platforms to check out our other upcoming programming. Finally, we're also streaming this talk live on YouTube right now, and we're going to be recording this video and uploading it to YouTube for posterity and future viewing. So I would like to ask that everyone make sure that their audio is muted, although I think we're all pretty good at Zoom now. But you can do that by clicking on the microphone logo at the bottom left of your screen. You can leave your camera on or you can turn it off, but if you have it on, you might be on our YouTube. We also have ASL interpreters available for this talk. Their names are Cindy and Christina, and they're going to be switching back and forth throughout the talk. Thank you so much to both of you for providing this service. We're very grateful. We also have live transcription, which you can turn on and off by clicking on the little CC live transcript button at the bottom panel. If you're finding that the text isn't in a good place for you, you can drag and drop it to wherever you'd like on the screen. And if you're having any technical issues throughout the talk, please just message SOA Gallery Tech in the chat window, and Kayelynn will help you out. We're going to have time at the end of the panel for some questions with the artist and curator. So if you have a question or comment, then you can type it in the chat, or you can unmute yourself and ask aloud. We'll also be collecting questions over on YouTube Live. So if you're accessing this over on YouTube, feel free to leave your questions in the chat, and our staff will deliver them to Zoom for us to consider. And now, with some ado, I would like to turn it over to Ciel Noel, who will introduce you to tonight's artists. Thank you so much, Ciel. Welcome.
Hello, thank you. Thank you very much, Blair, for that introduction. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask each of the artists to introduce yourself briefly to the audience. And so you can share your name, your pronoun if you're comfortable, where you're from, a bit about your artistic practice, and then we'll get into the questions. I have about, 5 of them. I'll ask a question, each artist will take an opportunity to answer, and we'll just kind of move on from there. So Adele, if you would like to start us off with introducing yourself.
Thank you. Thanks, Ciel. Really happy to be here today. My name is Adelle Lin, and my pronouns are she, they. I'm originally from Malaysia, and I now live in Brooklyn, New York. A little bit about my practice. I'm an interdisciplinary artist, and I work across both physical and digital mediums. I really enjoy creating opportunities for fun interactions, and I like bringing a lot of whimsy to the work that I do. And yeah, really excited to be here.
Awesome, thank you. Kayelynn, would you like to go next?
Hi, I'm Kayelynn Kennedy. I am a freelance illustrator, character designer, and polymer clay artist from Northern California. My pronouns are she, her. I do a variety of things, primarily digital and some traditional. Most of my digital work is like animation inspired, bright and colorful and fun and whimsical. And I also like miniature food jewelry and figurines and stuff.
Awesome, thank you so much. Hōkū, would you like to go next?
Alpha Ciel, Skuk Hudiniak, Aniana Chigig, Hōkū Schurz, Aniana Humchkum, Humako Idoc. Good evening, everyone. I'm Hōkū Schurz. I go by she, they, or Oya. I'm 21 years old. I was born and raised in Arizona. I'm currently residing in Waimanalo, Oahu, Hawaii. And I'm from the Akamiratam Reservation on the Salt River Pima Maricopa Indian community. I am also Ihangtowan Dakota, as well as Native Hawaiian. And my primary art practice is indigenous beadwork, whether that be traditional or contemporary pieces.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Hōkū, for that introduction. Okay, so I think before I ask my first question, I'm just going to give a little brief intro into the exhibition. And so for PAWS, like Blair was saying, I got to work a little bit with the gallery, and I got to work on sort of interactive experimental places for art. And so with PAWS, I was really inspired by certain sort of protests in Animal Crossing that had happened in Hong Kong. And then I had found Adele's Black Lives Matter protest. And from there, I sort of like explored a bit of my own relationship between protest and self-care and that kind of intersection in our lives and how we navigate that. And so I thought it'd be a good idea to just give a little brief introduction into the exhibition. And so from there, I want to start asking some questions of our artists. So my first question is, how did you start playing Animal Crossing New Horizons? And had you ever played an Animal Crossing game before? And Adele, why don't you start?
Yeah, this was my first Animal Crossing ever. I'd heard about the game before, but it didn't really have the right, I guess, hardware to play it. But I'd gotten a Switch probably the year before. What year was that? 2018, maybe 19. And mainly because I was doing a lot of travel, and so the Switch was something, you know, really fun to play on airplanes. And lockdown obviously happened kind of just at the same time that Animal Crossing came out, and it just sounded like so much fun, and it was like a great opportunity to jump in. And it definitely, I think, opened up that kind of sense of I'm pretty social, and I love going to weird events and just talking to people in general. And when lockdown happened, Animal Crossing kind of like opened that up in that sort of very similar way. And yeah, it was a very great transition into this sort of like digital social world that we're now thrust into.
Kayelynn, how about you go next?
I had heard of Animal Crossing, but I had never played it before. But when it was announced, I saw that you could be Black, and I was very excited. I hadn't really played video games in a while, other than with friends. Like my last console was the DS, and the last game I had was like the Kirby game. But I had been wanting to get back into gaming for a while, because I had missed it. And I was like, this is the perfect opportunity to get back into it. And I bought the Switch specifically to play Animal Crossing, and it's been a lot of fun since then.
Yeah. I also had not played Animal Crossing before New Horizons. I had mostly just seen my friends play, and it wasn't until after like they showed me around their little islands, they showed me their characters, then I decided to buy myself a Nintendo Switch specifically for playing Animal Crossing.
Awesome. Yeah, this is also my first Animal Crossing game. And I was really intrigued because I saw the really creative, interesting, unique artwork that people were making, like how customizable it was. And there's like a whole language that's developed on how people make art in Animal Crossing that I think I was really drawn to when I was considering the different platforms that we can use, ways that we can use video games for sharing art, or interesting platforms other than, Zoom is awesome. I love Zoom. We're having this over Zoom, but I wanted to kind of like different ways we could interact around art. And I think Animal Crossing provides some interesting sort of like limitations, but also at the same time a lot of freedoms to customize the island. So on that note, my next question is, what tools or elements of Animal Crossing drew you to working creatively in the game? Hōkū, did you want to start for this question?
Sure. So I was drawn to the ability to express myself in such like a cute and fun way. And because like you said, like the game, like your opportunities to do things are sort of endless. There are some limitations, but like there's still a lot to do. And just the way how you choose to put in effort to show your activism and really rally behind that. So I myself use a land back flag as my own personal like island flag, although it is my island already. It still like opens the conversation up for like if a friend were to come visit and they see my flag and they go, what does that mean? Like what, then I get to explain what that phrase really means to Native people in those ways, as well as, I'm sorry, it's just nice to be seen and heard and not just be like very quickly misunderstood for like anger or disappointment or frustration, which are commonly and understandably associated with movements that promote land back. And I just think it's just allows us this really cute and fun game as like a vehicle to express more serious matters that affect some of us outside of the game.
Yeah, I think that's really fair. There's you know, that's kind of like the part of the exact intersection we're talking about with PAWS is expressing yourself and taking care of yourself, and also like sometimes the challenging parts around activism as well, and how we navigate those and when we are different tools that we use. What about you, Adele?
Yeah, I think for me, it started on a really, I guess, celebratory note. I'd been playing a little bit, and I think I started playing when it was the Easter challenge, and I got so there was just so much like work to do, and I was like, this game is exhausting, and I kind of didn't play for like the next month. And but a friend was having a birthday party, and she was doing an Animal Crossing island and wanted to do like an island hop, and it was kind of like she usually throws like a big party called Ninja Penguin, and generally it's like music and DJs and dancing and themed. But last year, it couldn't happen in real life, so you know she was experimenting with all these different platforms. And as when I learned about the custom pattern tool, that just like something clicked, and it just unlocked a lot of kind of potential. And so I made a dance floor, and I set up like the DJ booth and made all these signs for her birthday. And it was just like a really it was a really fun night. We island hopped, and you know there was music, and it was just a lot of fun for that. And after that, I really started thinking more about like what did my island say about me, and what did it was a very interesting kind of like you said, there's like limitations with the game, as in, you know, the activities that you could do, but at the same time, it really, like, everybody's island is so personal, and it does kind of say something very specific about you. And customizing the custom tool, I do a lot of Photoshop, and so when I was really touched by this, I guess, the Say Their Names movement, and kind of in thinking about, I was looking at the Washington Post's database, police shootings database, and it kind of, I just had this idea of not just like for having the names, but also photos, you know, and just kind of having like these gentle reminders when people come over, even though we're here for fun, you know, their lives being lost, and you know, trying to connect to what was going on outside. So that's kind of how some of this transcended for me.
Yeah, thank you so much, Adele. Kayelynn.
My favorite way to express myself creatively in the game is changing my outfits, which is not something I was doing nearly as frequently throughout this whole quarantine. Any game that I get to change the outfit, change up the look, I have a good time. Also, just designing the islands was a really cool idea, like just having different random objects to create like multiple micro environments. Like my island has like a lot of different themes. Like I love Disneyland, so there are things that I wanted to incorporate that reminded me of Disneyland. I have like the teacups, and I also have the line leading up to the teacups because that is 90% of Disneyland is waiting in line. I also have my museum outside theme is Power Rangers, and I use the fossils that correlated with the original Mighty Morphin Rangers with their outfits, and then also flowers that matched the Rangers. So it's probably my favorite part of the island. Just doing things that were like specifically things that I enjoyed and loved. Just incorporating that into my island design, and yeah, it was just really exciting to just do something creative that was outside of my normal creative like work and hobbies and stuff.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
cool.
I really like that.
No, go ahead, Belle.
Oh, I was just reminded. Yeah, with the themed areas, I also like the flowers. I feel like are a really interesting tool, and I've been using color as well to kind of like delineate between different areas, and using like types of flowers and like repeating patterns. I have like a Chinese restaurant, and I love the red and gold are something very prominent in Asian decoration. And it was just so perfect that you have gold roses and red roses. So I have this like whole red and gold area, but it's super, yeah. You don't have like flowers, I think, in any other kind of like game in the way that you do in Animal Crossing. And I feel like it's a really fun tool as well.
Yeah, I'm actually listening to you had me thinking like, what would you call? This is not on the list. This is not on the question list, but I'm curious about this. We're deviating from the script, but what would you call the kind of art that you do on Animal Crossing? Like, I often think of it as like assemblage a bit, because you have objects that you're placing. For those who haven't played the game before, you can one of the ways that you can customize the game is you can make these prints that you can put them on the ground, you can put them on signs, you can put them on simple panels, these walls, and you can make custom clothing, pro designs. But another way that people really make a lot of art is they put objects grouped together down and around, and often like they're themed or they're made to represent a certain scene, like maybe a cafe or a beach spot. Like, I feel like I'm not even describing the breadth of how people use these things, but I'm curious, would folks call it assemblage? Would you call it like kind of like theater a little bit?
I think it's kind of like a combination of like a lot of things. Like you're a landscape artist, you're like an interior decorator, you're a florist, you're I can't think of any other words, but it's like you're a lot of different things because there's a lot of different things within the game that you can do. You're like also, what's the people that dig up fossils? Whatever
Archaeologist.
that was. Yes, we're like archaeologists.
Ethnographers.
Yes, we are. We wear multiple hats. Yeah, so it's just like a lot of different types of art that you just kind of get to embody when otherwise in reality you couldn't really do all those things because they're very specific careers. But in this game you get to do all the things you want to do.
That does actually make me think of one of my next questions. Unless, Hōkū, did you want to answer this one about what would you call the art that we do in Animal Crossing?
I think Kayelynn really summed it up well. We do really just wear all the hats, like one man for everything. That's what we do.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. It's a very fun kind of like, I call it like kind of like a slow or casual game where you get to explore. You just do all your daily tasks. You pick flowers, you decorate, you get dressed, you visit villagers. Um, but yeah, my question was, how do creative aspects of Animal Crossing New Horizons translate to your life outside the game? And maybe Kayelynn, would you like to go first?
It was a great way to escape reality. um, I I don't even know where to begin. I think that it kind of like let me like explore things that I didn't really explore. Like you wear a lot of hats, so you're like exploring different ways to create. And I like got in more into interior decorating. Like I never owned a power drill and I put up shelves in my house and stuff because I was like, ooh, what can I do inside my real house that kind of like makes me want to like be more creative out like things that like are in the game that I'm like, oh, I can kind of translate this outside of the game. Um, and yeah, like it's been really fun to kind of explore things about myself that I didn't really think that I would like be interested in. And it's not something that I expected when I got back into video games. Like it's like the game reflects my real world and the real world affects the game. So it's just been really cool to kind of explore that.
Yeah, you are very literally wearing the outfit from your exhibition art on the Zoom call. When folks see the exhibition, you'll see that Kayelynn is actually dressed in the outfit, which is so funny that I asked you first for this question because I wasn't thinking about that. But yeah, it's interesting because it's like it's such a creative game. It's choice all day long, right? You can do whatever you want on this island. So there is like a lot of overlap between how you're feeling in game and out of game, you know? I like that. I like that liminal space.
I wish I had those star glasses though. I don't have those.
Not yet, not yet. We'll have to find some for you. Hōkū, would you like to go next?
Sure. I think Animal Crossing translates in a very like specific way just through like the art style. Like if you want to make a design and you know like set up all your little pixels, if it's going to be like of a portrait or something specific, it's kind of like the same way in like loom beading. Like you have to have like a plan like to process how are you gonna turn this like sort of pixelated image into art. So I also just like I've been more confident with wearing sort of like traditional contemporary like indigenous clothes outside of the game because that's what I've just been mainly doing. It's just making me all these clothes that I can't make myself in real life. And yeah, it's just given me the confidence to go out and be like, I don't care what anyone thinks about me wearing this like skirt that I know nobody else has. But like, I just really feel like I can shine.
Yeah, I think I think Animal Crossing sort of came in at this time. Such a crazy, interesting, like chaotic moment in like everybody's history of their life now. And there's this like one, you know, like one almost, yeah, we're at a full, almost at a full year of this time capsule, I think. And I think for the first time where games are this so hyper connected in this sort of way, I think like I don't know about how the multiplayer worked in the previous games, but having this sort of, you can create your own world sort of game and then also have friends over at the same time. It's still really new in terms of video games, really. And I think somehow that just like really blended for me in terms of like regular life and having friends. And like I do a lot of interactive installations, and I like creating scenes that people can kind of play in or play with and get them to engage with themselves and the spaces that they occupy. And without really even kind of, I guess, thinking about it too much. And you were talking about the art that we create. It does feel like for me, there's this like weird extension into this digital realm, yet like you're sort of like recreating a physical world. You've got this house, you've got like plants and trees and things like that, but you're in this digital world and your friends are over. Sorry, I'm getting a little bit meta. But yeah, I think I also really wanted to be out, I think, last year with the protests, and it was such a difficult time for everybody to do that. And I think how I started to connect Animal Crossing, and that was first was sort of creating the spaces, but then as things like heated up in the streets, I kind of like also started to feel this anxiousness, and it was culminating with seeing friends getting really fatigued on the internet, and Black friends especially, and kind of really wanting to be an ally in that moment. I was thinking, what can I do? And just sort of like having this, I guess, space for communication and play. It occurred to me, like, could we do some kind of like a protest and then also sort of fundraising? And so I think as I had the Animal Crossing event, I was streaming that over Twitch and bringing in protest videos from other Twitch streams, and it created like a really sort of like interesting. There were these interesting moments I felt on the island that almost mirrored some of the moments where I've been out protesting, and it was very interesting. Those lines kind of, or the worlds blurred between like the physical and the digital. Yeah, I don't, it's such a weird time.
Yeah, I think there's like we're not even out of the pandemic, right? Like we can't even I feel like I'm still even processing it, but there's nothing in our life right now happens without that kind of awareness of the pandemic. And I think you're right that like Animal Crossing provided this space for a lot of people where they could, like, I've seen people have like birthday parties. Like your villagers will throw you a birthday party, but like you could also have birthday parties. You see people do engagement shoots, wedding shoots in Animal Crossing. You see people who are playing with family members that they can't see. And so this time of, very particularly challenging time, we're trying to figure out like when is it safe to go out, when it's important that I stay home, when am I able? And then you have this game, and it's very customizable, very creative, and it's in a way simplified. Nintendo has a way of sort of like heavily curating their game space for players. So it has certain boundaries, but it also kind of creates a simplicity, like in the art style and the way the menus are done, that feels very cute and appealing. And so, I see why a lot of people were drawn to it. I think that's probably one of the reasons why I was drawn to it. Of all the things that I could have chosen to do a project in, there was it had a particular kind of charm to be perfectly honest, that I found really nourishing for me during this time of figuring out like working online and going to like Zoom classes for hours or talks for hours and just like not physically being able to keep up with it. I really enjoyed like the very different environment that Animal Crossing made. And yeah, we are in an interesting time with video games too, where there is a lot, you could always be very creative with them, but there's like, the more tools we get, the more we are able to customize the spaces. And like, it's just, yeah, it's very interesting. I feel like I'm wandering off on a tangent. Okay, and so I've probably got maybe one more question and then we'll open it up to questions from everyone else. I was kind of curious, what other creative tools would you have liked to see in Animal Crossing? Like, what do you think would like kind of improve your experience of the game if there were some changes that were to be made? Because I'm kind of curious how people feel about that line between freedom and limitations in the game. And Adele, would you like to go first?
Sure. Yeah, I don't know if this is so much like a creative tool, but one thing I found tricky was kind of like sharing, I guess, things that you or like events with friends on your island. I didn't have a clever way of doing it in game. I guess I could, go around to everyone's island and put something on their bulletin board or like, I guess you could send text messages and things like that, but you can really do it if people are offline. So, one way is like, one thing I would like is, a way of sharing events. Maybe there's like an events thing in your app, or so you know what's going on, or if your friends are like doing something, because you kind of have to go outside to other channels. Like there are all these like Discord groups that I was in and WhatsApp chats, and that's how people were sharing things. So Nintendo has an app and everything too, so it was interesting that we still had to like go to all these other different social platforms to invite people to this particular social platform. And another thing, which I think is more like my, I wish I was as creative as some of these people, but I have this like goth area, and I was looking around for some inspiration, and I kind of stumbled onto like people building castles with, I think, lighthouses and these like panels, and also like some of the gates, and like people would layer them on. You would have your lighthouse, and then you would layer the panels in front of it, and it's just like incredible. And I think, yeah, maybe another thing would be like customizing walls a little bit more easily, because there's some deficiencies with the panel, because you can't get a design like it has to be like tiled properly. Anyway, a lot of details fit. Yeah, custom walls. Oh, and can we put rugs outside, please?
Yeah. Wait, I like what you're describing with the castle. It's such a particular kind of Animal Crossing like playing pretend that happens when people set up. Like I've seen people make cityscapes where they make a cliff with earth and then they surround it with panels. And it's kind of hard to describe, but there's a certain amount of suspended like disbelief that you have to have like as you're kind of like imagining the scene. And that actually almost even layers even more for me into like the charm of Animal Crossing, where it's like, oh, I'm playing pretend by playing the game, but I'm also playing by pretending that mannequin is serving me coffee that I can't drink as I sit here in this little coffee shop that I spent 5 hours designing. Why would I do that? Because it's adorable. That's why. What about you, Kayelynn?
I also agree that we should have wall hangings and rugs outside. That would be greatly appreciated. But also, I really liked the cooking that was in the Turkey Day event. That was really, really fun. I would love to like have like more of that, whether it's like making like a coffee or making a pie or whatever, whether it's like in your own kitchen or like you have to go somewhere else to do it. Like that would be really cool. Also earrings. I would love earrings would be really cool. Especially like dangly ones because I really like the mechanics of when like there's like long hair and it like moves. I would love like dangly earrings to move. I think that would be really cute. And it'd really tie in the outfits together. What else? Yeah, I think that's that's kind of the main things I would want.
I think I agree about the buildings. Like castle, that's amazing. Never would have thought of it. I do wish that you could like kind of decide like what kind of house you'd get instead of like one stock house. And the only other thing is just like super small. I also wish that in addition to the forehead and cheek like placement, you're allowed to add like decorations to them. I'd also like to be able to add something on the chin. That's just like the only part of the face that isn't available to add anything to. So while I do have like the makeup, I would love for there to be like the opportunity to put like chin tattoos, because that's another like traditional practice that I've like been dreaming of reviving. And I feel like if more people saw it on Animal Crossing and like how cute it is, like I genuinely think they're adorable, they're so powerful. Like you see somebody with a chin tattoo and you're like, they got tattooed on their face, like wow. And like just the meanings behind that. And there's just so many different groups of people who have facial markings, that I think it would be a really, really good tool to use to like, I don't know, help identify and like diversify everyone's characters.
Yeah, I love that in The Expanse, the face markings, the tattoos.
Another thing that I had like thought about is like when you have villagers that move away, there's some villagers that I let go that I really liked and I like wish they could like send us letters like every so often. They'll be like, hey, how's it going? I missed you. That would be really cute. Especially like if you're like close friends with them, but then you're like, I'm kind of bored of this one, I'm kind of want something new, but you still like them and they would still like be able to send you letters or you could send them letters or something. That would be really cool.
Yeah, I feel like it's so funny because villagers are such a huge part of this game. Like people will track down their favorite villagers. They'll spend hours like looking for them to try to invite them in. And it's just such a part like that we didn't touch at all at all on this thing. You could play a whole different game just by pursuing villager hunting for sure. Okay, so I wanted to kind of open up the questions to audience. Does anyone in the audience have any questions? You can type it in the chat. You can unmute yourself to ask. You can, put it to the floor or ask a particular artist. And also on YouTube, you are able to tap questions in the chat.
Ooh, I'll ask a question.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. I guess I would like to know from the artists, and I guess this is like to the whole panel. Could you talk about the like collaborative experience of like creating an exhibition or working with a curator in Animal Crossing? Because I know as like working at the gallery, it posed some really interesting conversations between Ciel and I where we were like, oh, like how do we like create sort of a contract for this? Or like how do we kind of adapt the language of like exhibitions? And I also think it's quite interesting to see these like Mel's creative adaptations of your work, of the things that you've made in Animal Crossing in this sort of other context. And I wonder what that was like as artists.
I'll go first. Okay. I really love working with you guys. You and Mel made this such a breeze. Keeping me in the loop on everything. Just like, first of all, like setting it all up. It looked amazing, by the way. I went to go check it out earlier. And it was just a really good experience. This is the first time I've ever like worked like with the curator, just in this whole exhibition thing. And I had a really good time. I would do it again. Yeah, and it was really nice working with you guys.
Oh, thank you, Hōkū.
Yeah, I agree. It was such a fun experience. It's like it's not something that I even thought of, like having a gallery in Animal Crossing. And then Ciel contacted me and I was like, this sounds amazing. I have to be a part of it. Like it was just such a cool idea and a cool concept, and then like the experience was really awesome. And I was like trying to figure out, how do I create art like in Animal Crossing? Because like it's not something, like, even though I do digital art, like I didn't do a whole lot of like custom design. So I was like, okay, let me like explore this more. And it was just such a fun experience, and I loved it.
Yeah, I think I've studied interior design, and I felt like this, I never really had the opportunity to like build an entire kind of installation from the landscape down to all the elements, and it kind of the cinematography of it really kind of inspired me that I could do lots of things like with scale and you know, so I created a really narrow passageway going into my space, kind of wanting people to feel that sort of sense of oppression in a way, and trying to use that kind of sense of space. And then having that opening into the memorial sort of at the end of the tunnel. And it was really interesting to be able to play and experiment with those sorts of ideas. And then when it kind of came to working with Mel and Ciel, which was so much fun, I got to go to the gallery and we got to talk about the space and you know, like think about what elements to bring in. That was a lot of fun, and kind of seeing the interpretation, like going in today and kind of seeing how the flowers were arranged, and the pillows, and the beautiful images on the floor, and it kind of reflects back to you as like maybe how people are seeing what you do. And then also it's a lot of fun bringing items over we had this sort of like exchange where we were collecting, Ciel and I were collecting stuff on our island and then bring it over to Mel, and then you would forget something and then you would like jump on a plane to go home. But then you can't actually touch anything on the island, so you kind of had to like drop stuff off and then kind of like, you know, leave it up to the person who owned the island to, you know, to do what they will. And they can't really place it while you're there, so there's that weird thing where in a real like gallery space you could maybe move an object kind of together, but here you couldn't really. So I thought that was kind of like a weird twist on reality there.
I gotta say thank you for trusting me with the placement of everything, because even though I had Ciel there, I basically had freedom to lay it all out how I wanted. But
you had the power.
Not having you guys there to actually be like, you need to place this here with this particular light or these flowers while it was all being built was a little daunting. But everybody seemed happy with what happened, so yay. But I would definitely work with you guys again in a similar experience, even another game. It was probably the best gaming experience I've had. And I usually don't play cutesy games, but being able to set up an exhibit was quite an interesting experience. And the different types of art and just finding a way to make it work for everybody so that you could just smoothly transition through each one without being overwhelmed was a little challenging. But I think anyone that goes to the island now, they'll be able to sit and just ponder and enjoy the space without feeling pressure to take too much away from it, but at the same time learn from it. And again, thank you guys for trusting me to place things the way they are.
Yeah, this was a very particular challenge to try to translate the space of an art gallery into Animal Crossing, because you make anything in Animal Crossing if you're creative enough. And I think Mel did a really great job of giving us like a pathway to walk. We walked the island a lot of times, and there was a lot of conversation about how do we create space, because you can't really make a new building in Animal Crossing. We couldn't make an enclosed art gallery, so we had sort of the entire kind of island area to work with, and we chose to work a lot with cliffs and ground to kind of differentiate the space. And it really did incorporate like a lot of a peculiar kind of like landscaping that I've never had to consider in the installation before. You could do a lot with water, you could do a lot with foliage, and yeah, it was daunting to like, because in some ways it's really easy to communicate, but in some ways it's also hard to communicate. Like we would have the Zoom meeting or we'd have the drop off, and I come away thinking, oh, did I interpret that language kind of correctly? But I imagine that that's probably true, like whether you're in person in a gallery space or kind of a little bit more separated. We actually have a question in the chat. Did you feel any hesitation or judgment from others with the show, from people feeling that Animal Crossing isn't a traditional art form, etc.? That's a good question. I have to say, for me as a curator, no. The gallery was really supportive. Blair was really supportive of me doing something that I found like engaging and interesting in these times where we could experiment a little bit more with online platforms. And like each of the artists seemed really excited because I guess we kind of got an opportunity to do something with Animal Crossing, something that we kind of like all love. Like we had this kind of shared kind of hobby that we could kind of connect with and try to figure out how to do something cool with it. More what I found more hesitation, interestingly enough, talking to Animal Crossing people about it because of the protest element. And I think that this kind of cuts into something that kind of relates a little bit with what we're talking about, what people feel Animal Crossing is for, whether people feel that it is a space where they want to relax and focus on soft cuddly things. What does that mean for them? For some of us, engaging in activism is a way that we perform self-care, but for a lot of people there's like hesitation. They felt like that Animal Crossing wasn't necessarily the space to discuss these kind of topics. And so I would say that was more kind of like the only pushback I really felt around doing this project.
Yeah, I think it's definitely, I've been thinking about this, a little bit too. I was giving a workshop a couple weeks ago with a artist network, the Wide Awakes, that I'm a part of, and we were doing a workshop around spectacle and joy, kind of as a form of activism, and I presented this project, which like, I guess it wasn't, it's interesting because like the protest element wasn't for me, like I wasn't thinking of like I was creating art at the time. And even now kind of like sometimes sort of like thinking about how I frame that. And, you know, now I guess maybe we're talking about it in an art context, but at the time it wasn't really an art piece. And so this is kind of, yeah, very, I guess an interesting ongoing, like almost little bit of tension I have within myself now too, how, you know, you're talking about, I guess, some work that you're doing kind of like at a time of urgency, which I guess if you step away from it is an interesting way to time, like look at the time capsule a moment. But then how you talk about it and present that, yeah, in the context of art, I'm still trying to find like the right words. And this is a really great conversation that's helping me with that. So
yeah, it's interesting. Like for me, a lot of the inspiration for the show came from the protests happening in Hong Kong. And because I wasn't able to talk to anyone from Hong Kong, it was complicated for me to how do I express and portray this work and engage with the message that, you know, activists are saying, like, yes, please talk about this, but how do I engage with this narrative and this story in a way when I'm presenting it as art? You know, we put up an area at the beginning of the art exhibition to like kind of acknowledge what was going on in Hong Kong and sort of like mention that. And I had to create pieces for it. And I was like, how do I go about doing that? How do I go about doing that not being in Hong Kong? How do I go about doing that not being able to discuss with anyone who's agreed to have that conversation about how they want things kind of like portrayed and displayed? And, you know, I imagine this is sort of this is always sort of a question that you deal with art, like what is your, how do you display your work? How is it being framed? Because it's different if I go to, say, a sort of event to like learn something and work on making protest art there versus making art to put up in a gallery space specifically. And in some ways, doing this project in Animal Crossing added a more casual element to this for me that I think was helpful. But I had to interact with a lot of questions about how I wanted to approach these varying experiences, intersections of protest and self-care, and the important narratives behind them. Even like when we're displaying the work, when we're displaying, for example, like the land back flag, and we were doing the curator tour. And in the end, when I did the tour, I pretty much told people, like we'd done a recording. I pretty much told people, like, you're probably going to want to look it up and find out more, because your relationship to what this means, like one, you know, Hōkū isn't here to explain that to you during this tour. But at the same time, you know, we have to learn how to go out into the world and learn about these things in a respectful, compassionate, good way. And so in the end, it was pretty much like, yeah, you should find out what this might mean to you and your relationship and your intersection where you're at on land. And so I think that there's a lot of questions and a lot of like, this exhibition, I guess, was like kind of like a lot of strange intersections, a lot of strange questions to ask. How do we make this art show? How do we make an art show about protest and self-care? What is art in video game spaces? But try to have an interesting, fun time doing it as much as you can. It's a really interesting material culture from a strange time in human history. It's been so long, I don't know exactly what this is in reference to, but I agree with the sentiment across the board in this conversation.
I think as Adelle was talking about the work that they were doing as kind of not like not thinking of it as art at the time of its making, but I do think like sort of putting it into this like exhibition context, like kind of, you know, in thinking about it as like sort of strange material culture, like a very specific material culture from an unusual time in history, right? I guess I was also sort of thinking about the ways that like on one hand Animal Crossing feels like sort of a fun escapist like activity, and on the other hand like the reason that it maybe has become so popular and has become like used in this way is like because of the pandemic, because of like these very real situations that like the very fact that we're having a birthday party in Animal Crossing like reminds us of the real world. Do you know what I mean?
And I think it's good to have like a space where there's like some common ground or like a place of peace, and then like bringing up things that are important to talk about, like in a sitcom, like a very special episode. Like Animal Crossing is a very fun thing, but it also gives you the opportunity to communicate things that are like, I guess, more easily digestible. I guess that's oh, it feels like a weird way to put it, but that's kind of what I mean. Like it's like if you're being introduced to some of the horrors of the world, you're kind of like it's kind of being fed to you with like a long-handled spoon kind of, and then you're like thinking like, oh, now that I'm aware of this, now that I can learn more about it. But even being on, even personally experiencing things, there's a lot of things that I'm learning that I didn't learn, and then I sometimes have to take a break from it because it's a lot, because whether it affects me directly or not, it still hurts me directly. So I have to um, kind of assess how I have to assess my limitations, because there are times where I'm like, I feel like I have to do everything at once. Like I have to, I have to, I have to learn all of this new information and like relearn all this old information that I had kind of forgotten about, that I kind of had to suppress for my own mental stability, I guess. It's it's good to have a space where you can kind of take a break from it, but also embrace it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, because it's like a safe space for you, and you can choose who to invite into that space most of the time. Yeah, that's really powerful.
Can I also say that it's also a space that's accessible to people that normally wouldn't be able to access these things? I had a conversation earlier with someone who doesn't really, they can't really get around as much even before the pandemic. And for them, Animal Crossing is a great way to interact with others because it's so accessible, and they can access the protests that they weren't able to go to physically in that manner. So I think that's a great platform for inclusion. So you have the cute and whimsical side to it, but if you need to learn something or you want to partake in something, but you physically can't, it's a space where you can go to partake in that thing.
Yeah, I had a friend from Australia attend, because and it was very interesting to be able to have that sort of like conversation with someone who isn't here, and I guess seeing different news and different media. And I was also kind of just thinking, yeah, about I guess in the context of Hong Kong, I haven't lived in Hong Kong, but I grew up in a sort of similar, I would say, media oppressive sort of regime where, and it was also kind of like before social media, but media is very oppressed in a lot of parts of Asia, and the government really wants to control the narrative in many ways. And I guess games are now a form of media, and a lot of media is, I guess, self-published, and a lot of news is is so yeah, it's interesting to kind of think about like if people really want to watch what you are doing in your games and what you're saying, and you know, as another form of social media, how that can potentially be really risky. And I think I feel safe in that regard in the US. But I would potentially feel different maybe if I was back home and or like in Hong Kong. And yeah, Tiananmen Square wasn't too long ago. So.
Yeah, it's true, right? Like these are there was an element of like kind of considering like the fact like working with the gallery and then feeling like relative safety, like sharing some of these things in these messages. And yeah, I think that I was also I was interested in how people used Animal Crossing to express difficult things, to share challenging things in a way that you could also decide. Like you could decide to water flowers all day, or you could decide to go to the protest. And it was like really, it's really individual, right? Like it's Animal Crossing can reflect in a way our own individual relationship with that intersection between protest and self-care. When do I engage in with things? When do I water the flowers? Because at the end of the day, I think a lot of protest and a lot of activism has to do with quality of life, right? Like wanting lives to be better for yourself, for your loved ones, for different things that you've seen that you want to see reflected in the world. And I think, yeah, it's kind of like a lifelong thing to navigate where you are at different points in time. When are you engaging more in self-care? When are you engaging more activism? And what that looks like for you as an individual, for sure. Are there any more questions? No, I think we're good. I think we're good. So I wanted to thank our artists for joining us. Thank you so much for having a conversation with me. Thank you to our interpreters as well for joining us. Thank you, Mel, the designer of the PAWS Island, for joining us. And thank you to the audience for joining us and the gallery for letting me do this project. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ciel. Thanks, everyone. Very exciting. Take care. Clap, clap, clap.